Yeah, so welcome, mate. It's an absolute honour to have you on. I know we've been fortunate enough to have you on the podcast before, and I don't mind sharing our conversation, which said you don't mind talking to us because you don't mind. We don't get you to repeat yourself, and actually we talk about
Absolutely.
different stuff.
That sounds like it's going to be a bit of a dig at other places, and I don't mean it to be, but sometimes the questions get a little bit repetitive. They're like, how do you
Sure.
mentally prepare for a set? And it's like, oh man, am I talking about this again? um, so yeah, like the one that we did, it was so different. It got me thinking in a really different way, which is lovely.
We got such a positive response from that, and
Yeah.
I know possibly to the viewers and the listeners now, identity assassination sounds a bit cryptic, but we thought we'd kickstart it because we are social beings. We have evolved into living in these social groups. It shapes us, our behaviour. It gives us a sense of identity, and bodybuilding is like it's at the extreme end of that.
Yeah.
So I'm going to get you to do the formal bit first of all, which seems like a silly thing to do, but could you just tell the people that might not be aware of you a little bit about yourself, please?
Of course. So I am Jordan Peters. I run something called Train by JP, which is kind of diversified into a mishmash of different things now. Like some days I spend looking at leggings and crop tops, trying to work out if these will be suitable, like pulling on leggings and thinking, yeah, that's about right. Like, so my job has changed a lot compared to what it once was. But we provide training content via a subscription site. We provide supplements and we provide gym clothing. For now, we're trying to keep expanding, but that's what we do for now.
Yeah,
So
awesome. Yeah, so I think with the identity thing, it's I think anyone that's aware of it or being associated to one, and everyone can resonate on a certain level, whether they've called themselves vegan in the past, they've called themselves a paleo, or it is bodybuilding. It's whether it's a decision we're forced to make or sometimes we choose to make, is eventually we change identities as we evolve, like through our lives. And I know you've dedicated a huge amount of your life as being Jordan the bodybuilder, but I've seen you refer to a couple of times possibly the next phase in life.
for sure.
So I think it'd be really interesting to explore your thought process around that, possibly what some people are going through right now, where
Mm,
this might have been their last competitive year, and
yeah.
the competition schedule's cancelled. It's people that are putting things on pause. It'd be interesting to hear what your mental process is, what
Like,
you're going through at the moment.
like we know that the athletes probably more than than anyone have the potential to run into depression and states of anxiety following the ceasing of what they do. Like they dedicate such a large portion of their lives to, like you said, becoming this identity. And when that's over, I think it's a very scary prospect for a lot of individuals, um, especially if it's something that you haven't considered properly. And even if you have considered it, I don't necessarily think that you could be fully prepared for what that's going to leave you feeling, because you're going to have a huge void of not feeling those hormonal responses that you previously did, not hearing the crowd roar. Like if you're an athlete that performs in front of a crowd, I mean, that is daunting. But it's something that's always been in the back of my mind. Like genuinely, it always has. Like I've always viewed bodybuilding as something that I will do for this mid portion of my life. Like I can segregate my life into kind of three sections so far, where they've been dedicated to different disciplines. So I know I'm quite fortunate that I've been able to transition from different disciplines, which is then kind of given me the thought process to know that I can keep doing that. So once this phase is over, everything that I have acquired from like kind of mental and physical kind of adapt, everything like that I've learned essentially can then just be rolled over into the next thing I do. But like, I know some people will be scared of that. And I know some people, especially bodybuilders, maybe that walk along the street and then get comments constantly everywhere they go. That's going to stop. And I watch on social media now, and I see how some people post, where they will post the same most muscular pose 6-7 times a week. I kid you not. And I fear for those people. Not in like I don't take the piss. In all seriousness, I'm like, wow, that person is in for a rough time when all of a sudden that most muscular pose does not look like that, and they don't get those likes on that picture. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, okay, you need to be prepared for this. So then when you asked me to do this, I was really, really happy that maybe I could just give some people something to think about, to plan ahead, to just be sure of what's coming and how they're prepared to kind of transition into the next phase of their life. The second aspect that you're going to run into as a bodybuilder is that you cannot drag this out simply from a health perspective. Like from a physical health perspective. Like the sort of bodybuilding that I do is not healthy. Like I don't pretend for it to be healthy. I take the best steps that I can, but I'm very, very aware that it's not healthy. So then that's another reason why I've put a definite point where I'm like, okay, I'm done with that. Like I'm not going to walk around with my HDL where it is for any longer. I'm not prepared to prolong the kind of cardiovascular risks that I endure walking around at 300 pounds. It's not good. So you also trying to cling on to that because you've kind of got lost in this identity that you can't escape from, then poses some real physical health risks too. And when I see bodybuilders trying to kind of cling on to their size years after this has gone, that concerns me as well a lot. And like the way I see muscle is that it's rented. Like, and once it's done, that's it. You give it back, and it's not something that you should be trying to keep, because our physiology was never meant to be like crazily developed to ridiculous extents. And if you can't come to terms with that, then I think that's obviously it's sad, but I don't mean that in I mean that in a way that I'm just genuinely concerned for people. And I'm also concerned for myself, because although despite being very aware of it, this will be the biggest transition into another phase of my life that I've ever had to do. And it's
Sorry to interrupt you, Jordan. Just for some context, because I hope you mean I mean it in the most complimentary way. But you've been all in, like you've dedicated a large proportion of your adult life to this. How many years? Like how many years young are you now? How many years have you
I'm
devoted to
31.
bodybuilding?
I'm 32 this year. I did my first competition when I was 18.
Yeah, so it's a huge part of your life.
It is a big part of my life for sure.
I think to make it relatable as well to some people who might be in a different position, it's very similar to a bikini model, or even just someone on Instagram who's tying all their self-worth basically to how they look. And at some point that is going to fade, or they're going to have to move on, or someone younger and more attractive comes along. So there has to be more to it. And you have to be ready to think, okay, when I can no longer sell my business based solely on the way I look, is there going to be substance behind it? And can I move forward and like move into the next chapter of my life? And I think being ready for that, like if you're not ready, you'll get left behind basically.
Can I ask as well, Jordan, like, because you've essentially said that you've been doing this for sort of 13, 14 years. At what point in that process did you start coming to these conclusions that you're talking about now? Sort of, was this something that you were aware of before you started, or is this sort of something that has developed or has hit you at some stage? And how did that process come about?
That's a really good question. I think that when you're young, you think you're invincible. Like that's a common thought process, especially with young male bodybuilders. They will do reckless things. And at that point, I don't think you're really considering what occurs at the age of 30 plus. Mm-hmm. I would say for me, it's really occurred in the last couple of years, where I thought to myself, the quality of life that I live is actually quite poor, in the sense that on a day-to-day basis, I can't maybe go for the walks with the dog that I want to do just because I can't walk far enough. Like I can't go on day trips with my niece because I know that I won't be able to walk around the zoo with her. So for me, those things came into play in the last couple of years. And then that was a real kind of waking call for me to start considering how to move beyond this, because it was just very clear that I'm in a state now where this is not a sustainable way to live, both physically and mentally. That then also coincides with the identity aspect. Like that, the identity aspect isn't kind of like a driving force for me so much. I'm very aware of it, but it's quite hard to articulate. But I would say that you're only going to really come into these thought processes, hopefully, once you just get a bit wiser. Like once you've been doing this a while and you realize what this actually means in the grand scheme of life. And that's not necessarily to take away from being incredibly competitive or driven or focused, but it's just knowing that there is definitely a lot more beyond just one phase of your life, and that you should be able to just do multiple things and not just be locked in tunnel vision for too long.
Yeah, I think and like Emma says, I think it's applicable to so many different things. I mean, even sort of people who've poured everything into their career, and then when they retire, then they have nothing. They don't have any hobbies. They've not developed any interests or anything like that. We can apply this logic to so many things. It's something that I think we can all learn a huge amount from.
I think as well, like now is probably a time a lot of people are thinking about that, because potentially they have had their purpose taken away, whether that be a bodybuilding show or their career. And it just gives you that like perspective at the moment that what is important to you can become quite clear.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Like right now though, like for me, like that all the while I'm still in one phase, like that won't really deter my focus. But knowing that I already said that next year would be the final year that I compete. Just because I'm just not prepared to carry on putting my body through what I do for another year. So then already having to think, okay, how am I going to diversify all this focus and drive that I have? Because like for me personally, there has to be some kind of like sporting endeavor, like that will never leave me. I always have to have that. I know that I need some kind of competition. That's always been a part of my life from a very young age. So I think that if an individual has had that for a very long time, they're going to need to find something else where they can compete. And I'm excited at the prospect of doing something entirely new. Like I want to go back in and have no idea what I'm doing. I want to be an absolute total beginner and learn as if just like embark on a total new journey. Like I can't wait for that. Like it excites me so much, the prospect of doing that, of being utterly shit at something and then trying to get good at it. That fascinates me so much. And I know for a fact that for me that will be jiu-jitsu. I just can't wait to start. Like I'm already now like, should I go to a class now? But I'm not really right. I'm still trying to be a bodybuilder. So let's not try and go and roll around with people.
Oh, JP starts golf or something.
Well, I was just thinking I go jiu-jitsu and F rolling with JP. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, but like, Dan, do you already do it?
Yeah.
So you would just destroy me. It would be brilliant. Like I would love it.
Well, once lockdown measures are lifted and you're out of competing, perhaps we do that next year at some point.
I would absolutely love it. It would be fantastic.
That would make a great podcast as well.
Yeah, we can just watch.
If you don't mind me asking, Jordan, because like it's okay, it's more than a hobby for you, but it's your business, it's your social circles, it's your friendship circles. Do you have any concerns about how that will be impacted as you move along?
Um, I would like to say that I will be okay, because I am a confident person in myself. I don't feel like I need bodybuilding to define me. I hope so. I hope so. Like, I'm sure some days it will catch me off guard where, like, all of a sudden I'll go from putting on a 5XL top to then maybe just a large top. And I'll walk down the street and people won't double take. And I'm sure some days I'll be like, man, I miss being fucking massive. But like, I am so aware that you can't cling on to that. Like, so as long as you have those things in place to try to move into those next phases, like, I know for sure that the moment I'm done, I will start jiu-jitsu training 3 or 4 times a week, without a doubt. Like, that's just the way I am. And
I think that's probably one of the pros we can take out of identity and how it supports people as well, because so far we've spoken about identity as like the potential pitfalls of that, but actually identity, it can be a huge driving force behind us as well.
I agree. I think if you have, if you're kind of put together in a certain way, and that's kind of the way that you think, then yeah, you can channel that into anything. Like, if you're able to be a successful bodybuilder, bikini competitor, figure competitor, then clearly you have an ability to adhere, and you have an ability to work hard, and you have an ability to absorb information and then put that into practice. If you can do those things, you can apply this to anything. Like, you will see that a lot of good sportsmen are able to excel at multiple sports. Like, it's because it's a mentality that they have. Sure, they have incredible physical attributes, but they put into practice their ability to execute and adhere to just whatever discipline that they focus on. And I think that as long as you have in your sights where your focus is going to go, you're going to be okay on the other side of maybe a decade of bodybuilding.
I think the same is true for business as well. Like, it's going to be a pretty scary time after this, with potential recession and like, maybe people will have to change their businesses. And even if it's a completely new business, everything you've learned from setting up that first business can be transferred, or everything you've learned from bodybuilding about perseverance can be transferred, and about whenever there's something that you need to overcome, for example, staying in lockdown, but being able to maintain your muscle mass. These things, like adapting to the environment at the moment, that can be transferred to any skill or any life part, I guess.
Yeah, I very much agree. I think that one of the biggest things that you're just going to learn from being a sportsman for a long period of time is that, like, mini failures are not the same as quitting. And like, accumulating failure is a really, really good lesson to have learned, because when you move into the next discipline that you're going to do, you're going to fail a lot again. Like, it's starting any new venture of any kind, be it any kind of sporting discipline, business discipline, education, whatever, there's going to be lots of little failures. So then that's going to be something that you're used to, that you're able to adapt through, you're able to kind of just keep pushing on. And that's then never really going to hold you back from being able to improve. I think it's definitely an issue when people aren't able to learn from their failures. And then that's obviously not where we want to be.
I think that having insight into it is a massive thing. And I suppose that an interesting take-home point from that, like as a big conclusion from all the stuff that you've just said, is instead of looking at yourself as a bodybuilder, which is a very specific thing, looking at yourself as someone who is determined, hardworking, ambitious, someone who perseveres. You know, you don't have to give up any of those qualities. The only thing that you're giving up is that external shell, I suppose, and
Sure.
and what you channel those qualities into.
Sure. I think for most people, they need to remind themselves that there was life before kind of bodybuilding and competing. And then you need to remind yourself of how you felt and how your days looked before those things. And then just remind yourself that, reinforce the idea that it shouldn't be an issue on the other side. And I kind of say this in a way as well of like trying to reassure myself. So I'm at no point like preaching here to be like, oh yeah, don't worry, I'm going to be fine, because I definitely don't think I will be. Like I am just very, very aware of how prepared I think we all need to be, and that's why like I was open. That's why I started to openly discuss kind of the end of bodybuilding and the start of something new, because I like someone asked me on a Q&A, like what's the next phase of life, and like, I said to them that I don't consider a decade a long time. Like to me, that's not a long period of time to invest towards a goal. Like to me, a decade is like a realistic amount of time. Like if you said to me, okay, if there's something that you want, you have to put a decade of work in to do it, I'm like, okay, cool, I can do that. And I think that someone has to accept that to kind of master something, it can take as long as that. You're not just going to be able to kind of move into something else and then excel at it really quickly. It's going to take a long time. Like Dan, how long have you been doing jiu-jitsu?
Well, I'm back to it as of recent. I got back into it before Christmas, but prior to that, I did it for, before I'm not even going to say competed, before I was a participant in bodybuilding.
Okay.
So
Dan was doing jiu-jitsu before it was like really cool to do jiu-jitsu.
That's awesome.
Well, people abbreviated it to JITS.
JITS. It's now called
Yeah.
JITS. Yeah. But no, I can relate on a much, much tiny, smaller scale about the bodybuilding thing, because it's something that, you know, not necessarily as I moved on was something that's hugely part of my values, partly huge. But I bump into people now and they still ask about a next competition, and it does take your mind back there.
Yeah, sure.
And it's self-imposed pressure, but it's pressure. It's at the forefront of your mind. So it is hard to let go, but I think it begins with an awareness thing. So by the sounds of it, you're at least aware of it. But you spoke last time, and I mean, I hope you don't mind me bringing it up, as doing a lot more inner work now.
Sure.
And from that, a lot more awareness coming out of it. So I know it's going to be a contribution of both. Obviously, you mentioned physical health and also mental health. Was it more one of those things that you were most concerned about as you transition away from bodybuilding?
For me, the physical health aspect is a huge consideration. Like, so if there are like advanced elite level bodybuilders like listening to this now, that like they'll know like what I mean. And like obviously I have sleep apnea. I have to sleep with a CPAP. That's something that I would be really keen to get off. Like I would really like to not have to wear that to bed every night. Like I would really like to not have these lines on my face from my CPAP mask. Like those.
So what is it? Just a mask?
Yeah, so it's like a pressurized mask. So when I lay on my back and I fall asleep, my airways will close and I won't breathe on my own. So I need pressure to keep myself breathing. So I have to have a mask, which then is clamped on really hard, and then that's what's caused these kind of indentations in my face. So pre-CPAP, I never had these things that make me look like a bulldog. So hopefully, once I can get off of it, and like so little things like that, like and those are sacrifices that I have happily made for bodybuilding, but equally I'm like, okay, like enough is enough now. Like I'm not really prepared to sacrifice anything further. So yeah, definitely health is a huge consideration for me.
Yeah, because I know you mentioned like, you know, doing that extra work, perhaps speaking to someone, which was so refreshing on our podcast. By the way, we got such a positive response from that, because is not often that people are that open and transparent about that sort of things.
Sure.
Sort of things.
Yeah, like,
especially someone driven like yourself, that, you know, seemingly on videos, quite strong-minded, strong, because I think people, especially like mental health, we'll talk about this more tomorrow, but they think of it as reflective of like physical strength, that
sure.
by being vulnerable, and it's almost a weakness.
Sure. Like, I still do have therapy sessions. I don't live in Manchester now, so I can't see my therapist in person, but I have Skype therapy with her still, just because she was a massive influence in me being able to kind of make massive changes in my life. So that's something that's still ongoing. I'm not going to stop that anytime soon. I think I would regress if I wasn't constantly challenging myself in those kind of thought-provoking ways. I like to reflect on everything I've done. I like to think if I'm kind of conducting myself appropriately, especially kind of as you develop maybe in a business way as well, like trying to stick to your values and not kind of compromise and sell out. So there are lots of little things where I'm trying to stay on top of how I want to represent myself. So I think the therapy is a massive, massive benefit. In terms of like mental strength, reflecting physical strength, like we are not born with like crazy physical strength. Some people are born with like fairly resilient mental strength, but I think therapy brings something that is trainable in the same way as physical strength is. You cannot, maybe some people can, but I personally am not able to develop the ability to think in certain ways unless it's something that I practice. I'm happy to admit that. Like, some of these thought processes don't immediately come naturally to me. But I'm very aware that they're not necessarily how I always want to be. So they're things that I work on. And it's important to acknowledge that.
I completely agree with that. And
I think it's so often that people think that that's like innate, that you can't work on it. Oh, I'm just the kind of person that feels X and there's nothing I can do. That I have a short temper, and so that's just who I am, and you have to deal with me, and that's my personality, so I shouldn't have to change it.
Yeah.
But you don't have to be like that.
No, I think that's a big misunderstanding with people, and something that's like very much a hallmark of kind of, you know, limiting beliefs and having a sort of very fixed mindset versus having the growth mindset. And that's, you know, if you think about how much effort you've put into changing yourself physically and all of those sorts of things, and how much you've managed to achieve in that, I think people try a lot less hard to try and change themselves mentally, because they view it again as part of that identity. Like Emma was saying, they say, I am a person who is X. I am a person who does X. This is just what I'm like. If you can't accept me, then it's your problem, you know, when actually in reality, there is loads of stuff that we can work on. And I know that, you know, sometimes I feel like self-awareness and self-criticism and trying to change how you react to things is one of the best qualities that we can have as humans. And I'm constantly like, you know, if somebody gives me feedback on something that I've done badly, I won't always just take it as face value. I will reflect on it and sort of see if I agree with it logically. But if I do, people are always very surprised when I go, oh God, yeah, no, actually you're right. That was really bad of me, wasn't it? I shouldn't do that again. And people are like, what? Because it's not something that we really do very often, because we feel like it's a sign of weakness, when as actually I think it's more of potentially a sign of strength.
I think it's a huge strength to be able to do that. It takes, I don't know if courage is the right word. No, courage isn't the right word. You have to be, humility is the right word. You have to be genuinely humble to be able to do that. And to be able to, in that moment, kind of address how you're being. Like, I've successfully been able to change a lot of traits that I disliked. So like in like an argument where previously I might raise my voice and lose my temper, I will never lose my temper anymore in an argument. Genuinely. Like, and without even having to think about it now. Like, I will lower the tone of my voice and sit down and say, okay, can we have a discussion? And then previously, I would never have been able to do that. Like previously, I would have thrown a bowl at the wall, like shit like that. Like I'm serious. Like, and so little things like that. If you are someone that is of that way, that needs to change, and you can change it. But you won't change it unless you work on it. Like it has to be worked on.
It's really refreshing hearing you say that it's not even hard anymore, because I think, you know, it's like any sort of habit, or if you've worked hard to change something initially, it's going to be really hard to do. But now that it's just, you're a much calmer person, that you don't have to put that same effort in anymore.
Yeah, for sure. It's a much nicer way to be, because then especially afterwards you think about the way you behaved, and then you thought, oh damn, like that was good, like I didn't fuck that up, that was nice.
And regret is the worst feeling, right?
It really is, when you're like, I wish I didn't say that. Like whereas now the thought process is like, oh wow, I actually kind of nailed that. That was pretty cool. Like I was kind of in the heat of the moment, and the natural reaction was one of maybe kind of empathy and consideration and trying to come to a resolution, as opposed to trying to win an argument. That's a very different thought process. Like when I kind of get into disagreements now, the goal is not to try to win the argument, it's try to understand the other person's perspective.
And have your family noticed that, or like your girlfriend, or?
Corinne thinks that I am in some ways an entirely different person to the person that she knew 2 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah, she said in some ways, she said that she is very, very, very surprised that things were able to change the way they have. Because I mean, you have to remember that when we last did this talk, I was in an apartment on my own. I wasn't living with her at that point. And I'm back living here now. Like we're back together. So
cool.
And in lockdown.
For sure.
We all got
It's
a bit,
always going to be
emotional
intense.
last time, didn't we? It got quite emotional in that last one.
I started crying.
And that took a lot of therapy work to kind of, and then a lot of hard work to kind of show that change can be made. And then once then being back here, making sure that you don't slip back into your old ways. And that's an easy thing to do.
Because your environment, if you were in that environment before and behaved a different way, it's so easy just to go back to that.
It's also a complacency thing. So you can become complacent thinking that, okay, I'm back to where I want to be. So now I don't necessarily have to conduct myself a certain way. And yeah, that's where staying on top of therapy is important.
I guess it depends whether you're doing it to get what you want or doing it to be who you want to be. And there's two very different goals.
If it's just to get what you want, you will always slip back into your previous habits.
Yeah.
Like that's just it's just a matter of time until things break down again. Whereas if it's like a true reflection of how you want to be, then yeah, you can keep working on those things, and then they'll eventually, like I said, become your new normal. It just takes a bit of time to reinforce those habits and those thought processes, and I think a lot of that can be remodeled, which is good.
That seems to stem though from like a deep desire for you to change, as you know, you've said, because almost applicable to coaching is, I guess, when people approach you, sometimes they're perhaps not ready to. So that has to be something innate that comes from come within, I think, sometimes.
Yeah, for sure. Like once you are ready as an individual to kind of make the progress that you're hoping to make, but just you have to really accept that in yourself and know when the right time for that is.
Oh, awesome.
And hard question, but how would you know that? And I think often it does, you know, it has to come from you to a certain extent, but sometimes it does come from someone else, or even like the fear of losing someone to make, you know, sometimes there is like a catalyst to that. And if it's body weight change, sometimes it's things like, okay, now you are type 2 diabetic. And
Sure.
It's almost like that diagnosis is the thing to make change, even though you've been told, like every time you've been to the GP that losing weight would benefit your health. It takes that to make you think now's the time to change.
That's true. Actually, I kind of retract my my statement, but the last bit I said, like, wholly. I think you're really right that for a lot of people there then will be that kind of pivotal moment where then it's like, okay, something has to change. Like, for me, it was very clear. Like, it was like, Corin kicked me out of the house. So that was like, okay, shit. Like, there's moments like that are like, okay, you need to sort something out here. So then, and equally, like, if you have a heart attack or kind of those kind of real life-changing events, but then it's just about what you do afterwards. Like, everyone reacts in different ways.
Yeah, you've got to prove wrong the people that sort of say like, oh, they'll never change, which I think is the general go-to, like, oh, that's just who they are, they'll never change. And it's, again, that fixed mindset.
For sure. I totally agree.
We've had loads of positive response, I think, on the comments, haven't we?
Yeah, crazy comments. Like, this is an amazing conversation. Thank you so much to Jordan for being so honest and open, a truly remarkable guy. Thanks so much for opening up and sharing like this. It's good to hear. And this is it's a reflection, isn't it? That, like, you know, we're sort of expecting sometimes, you know, and this is where it comes back to identity assassination and talking about stereotypes and images and things. I think people are very surprised because of your background and because of your, you know, your size and your career and everything. People are very surprised to hear you perhaps talking like this. And I think that we were a little bit when we did the podcast with you. We're not now anymore because we come to expect it. It's one big therapy session, but it's people. How do you kind of deal with those sorts of stereotypes? Like, you know, when you were talking earlier about people making comments when you walk past them, I'm sure that lots of those are incredibly positive comments and admiration, but I'm sure a lot of them are, you know, perhaps not so nice comments and based around stereotypes that people have around bodybuilding as a sport. How do you react to that? How do you cope with that? Because I'm always interested to feel like, is it something that bothers you, or is it something that almost you take those things as compliments because of what it means to you?
Honestly, they don't even register with me. Like, when people make comments, like, I really do this for me, like, genuinely. Like, you'll see this with, like, I don't post progress pictures on Instagram. Like, in all seriousness, I don't. Like, I posted one the other day. I looked back the time before that. It was a 9-month gap before I posted a physique shot with me without my clothes on. Like, I really do this totally for me, and I don't give a fuck what anyone else thinks. Like, I never have, I never will. So,
did you think that's more of a concern? Sorry to interrupt you, Jordan, because from a validation point of view, there's a lot of people in bodybuilding in that industry that, as you've already suggested, they get those little dopamine flashes when they get likes, they get a certain amount of followers up, and they're the ones that are going to potentially find it more difficult, whereas you don't seem to be there with that.
Yeah, it's going to be hard. I think I was quite fortunate that I started bodybuilding before that was all a thing. So I started, like, just before Facebook even became a thing. So there was no validation that you needed. There was no validation that you could even get. So you didn't even know that you kind of needed it. Now, I think people start solely for the validation in some cases. And that's a difficult spot to be in. I think people need to try to understand that you have to be doing these kind of things for the right reasons, because there is so many things that you can do with your life. So many. Don't feel the need to kind of go down a path just to kind of get validation. Like, it sounds cheesy, but you really have to be doing something that makes you happy, because there will be things that genuinely make you happy, but maybe don't bring the same kind of external validation that attaining a certain physique would. But if you do the things that make you happy, it's going to be so much more fruitful in the long run.
Yeah, so would you say anyone sort of in that position, or maybe just starting their bodybuilding career, or even just more broadly their career in fitness, which is based sort of on their physique, at least to some extent? Or even more, okay, I'm going to change that question. More for bodybuilders, like, should they have an exit strategy? Should they have obviously plans change, but should they have a plan in their head that I'm going to give it my all for 5 years or for X amount of time, and then knowing that they plan to move away from that, even subconsciously during those 5 years, they'll be thinking about what to do next?
I really think so, yes. I think that you need to understand that bodybuilding in of itself is never going to really earn you enough money to support yourself. If anything, it's going to leave you with a hole in your pocket. Like, it's an expensive endeavor. I think that it's a very time-consuming and selfish pursuit. It is going to cost you time with your friends and your family, and you're going to have to make big sacrifices, and that you have to understand whether those things are potentially worth it or not. So I very much think that there needs to be the thought process of what is coming after this. Like, if you're a good bodybuilder and you've attained a lot of information, you are going to have the ability to help others. And I think that that's clear now. Most people are coaches. And I think that if you're truly passionate about helping others, then you're always going to be able to make an income from doing that. But the bodybuilding in of itself, it doesn't have a particularly long shelf life, I don't think.
Agreed. Do we have any? Oh, go ahead, Dan.
I was just say, from a coaching perspective, Jordan, like when you hang your trunks up, so to speak, is it business as usual with that? Do you still intend on coaching people?
Sure. Like, personally, that won't change. I enjoy doing that. It's especially at the moment. Like, I have a group of guys and girls that work really, really hard. They are of a mindset that I personally enjoy coaching. Like, I personally am not a particularly good coach to work with those that struggle with adherence. It's just the way that I am now as a coach. Like, there are people that are absolutely amazing at being that way. So, like, I don't take beginners on for that reason. As I kind of just try to stick to where I'm happy, because I want to be happy as a coach. So because then if I'm happy as a coach, the people that I'm coaching are going to be happy too. Whereas if I try to coach people that can't adhere, they will feel kind of my frustration, and they don't deserve that. So I don't even take them on as clients. So yeah, that won't change for me, because having a lot of fun doing that right now.
Yeah, I guess it's quite easy to find people that adhere well if you're looking at competitive bodybuilding. Like, that is basically the definition of people who must be adhering, or they wouldn't have got to that stage. Yeah,
like once you're kind of dealing with that group, like you don't, the adherence part is just out the window. You don't even have to have those conversations, and then you can just focus on kind of how to get really, really strong, how to get really, really big, how to get really, really lean. Whereas you can't really focus on those things when you're trying to jump over adherence hurdles. Like, trying to master the adherence part is the hardest part that you have to overcome. It's the main reason why people aren't making progress is just adherence.
And do you think that sort of, obviously, like, a lot of your business is tied in with bodybuilding? Like, when you do decide to move on into your next venture, and like from a sporting perspective, do you think that having your business still very heavily reliant on bodybuilding is going to make that harder, or do you think you'll just be able to compartmentalize those different parts of your life?
No, I don't think it'll be an issue for me at all, because I'll never stop weight training. I'll never stop eating the way I do. I'll never stop enjoying the progress that other bodybuilders make, and seeing people do cool things. Like, I love it. It's just amazing when you see people hit unbelievable amounts of muscle mass or crazy strength levels. I'm just like, fuck yes, that's awesome. I always want to be a part of that because and if I can help them, I really will. Like it's just so much fun. There's genuinely there's nothing I enjoy more. Like when I get progress pictures through at the moment from some of the guys, and I can see like Jamie Johol, for example, we got him up to like close to 340 pounds in body weight this off season. And then when I saw him in person, he was so big, and I was like, wow, this is unreal. And I just gave him a hug because I was just like, yes. I just became a muscle worshiper in that moment because I was like, this is unreal. And I was like, right, let's get this man some food. Let's get him to 350 pounds. So yeah, I'll never stop enjoying that. It's very cool to see people reach their goals in that way.
And is she going to compete again, or does she have plans for when she finishes bodybuilding?
She has a good few years left in her. Like she's only just starting to get good, like really good. So like, I don't think it's unreal. We have a good shot of her making the Olympia this year. Like that's a realistic goal, which then makes her one of the best in the world. And we're just getting going. Because the thing is with Corinne is that she had really difficult battles with kind of disordered eating, with needing to stay very, very lean between shows. This really held her back from being able to develop the muscle mass that she's capable of doing, because she was constantly adjusting her energy balance to offset the increase in calories that we were giving her. She's very, very good at knowing how much she needs to move. She is basically a human Fitbit. So if I'm like, right, let's take up calories 300 this week, then it will do nothing constantly. But we've managed to overcome that now. And now that we've managed to overcome that, and she's able to move away from her stage conditioning and she's comfortable in herself to let herself get a little bit fatter in the off season, knowing full well that that fat goes on, that fat comes off when she wants it to, and that she is in full control of that decision. It's now unlocked endless capabilities with how good she can be. So like we battled that through the whole 3-4 years. Like that was one of the large reasons that kind of why me and her really broke down as a couple, because when you're trying to battle disordered eating, at some point, it feels like you're having a conversation with someone that's not even your partner. It feels like you're talking to the eating disorder. I'm picking my words carefully here because I don't want to offend anyone or sound like I'm saying anything that's kind of rude, but like I've lived with that firsthand for a long time. And I know for sure that there was moments where the person I was talking to wasn't Corinne. So we've both managed to overcome that now. So then now that we have, and then we're on the same page, how good she is now is just unbelievable. So she's got a good
well, that's going to be insane to see if this is her like
I was just thinking that
get even better.
There's a few people scratching their heads right now.
So just for an example, last year on stage she weighed 142 pounds. This year, in just 1 year, obviously the competition was just cancelled, but the week that she was about to compete, she was 152 pounds. 10 pounds of stage weight in a year. Wow. We didn't gain 10 pounds in 4 years, and we did it in 1. Right, we got a competition again at the end of the year. She hopped on the scales this morning, and she was 168 pounds. I'm pretty sure that by the end of this year, we'll probably be about 158 stage weight. So we're looking at about 16 pounds of muscle in 1 year, just from then being able to accept that as a female, there are periods of time where if you want to be good, you cannot hang on to that ultra lean conditioning, which, as we all know, is a very, very difficult and different conversation again.
And I mean, are they starting to talk about that now in terms of putting shows back on? Is there a date you have, like provisionally?
Yeah, there are 3 shows that are kind of provisionally on that she can do. First one for her is 31st of October in California. The next one will be in the UK, and then the weekend after that is Romania. So we got 3 weekends on the bounce. Okay. She either has to win one or get enough points to be able to make it to the Olympia.
Wow, okay.
it's well within her grasp. It really is.
We'll look forward to watching that journey. Definitely.
Best of luck to her for that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We've had a few questions, haven't we? I think there's one about birthdays on here, and another about chocolate bars.
What's the birthdays one?
I haven't seen that on the Facebook group. Are we talking about
joking.
What was?
I'm joking. I won't ask you about birthdays and cheat meals. That's a joke.
We did. Okay, fine.
Oh, sorry. Go on,
I like
Mike.
to talk about those things. No, I was just going to say I'm disappointed because I quite like talking about those things.
We have had a couple of questions, haven't we?
We have had a couple of questions. I think one actually, Dan, you've just asked because it was, but an extension of it was quite interesting because someone was talking about continuing to coach sort of once you've stepped away from competing yourself. But the second part of that question was, and I think we know the answer to this, but it's just interesting to hear your reflection on it. How do you feel about putting people through what you're going through in terms of that sort of identity part of things, purely for the love of bodybuilding? And how will you address that going forward with your coaching clients when you've competing?
Well, because you've mentioned something there about putting my clients through something. The very first thing that I'm able to do is ensure that they really don't run into health implications. Well, I can't ensure that, but I can take very good steps, having learned what I've learned, to keep them as healthy as can be. Again, that's a very hard thing to guess, but I've learned a lot, and I can make sure I can prevent harm to the best of my ability, which is certainly something that's important from a physical perspective. From a mental perspective, the athletes that I look after, that I'm close to, the ones that I sponsor, we are constantly looking at building their brand, building them as an individual, making sure that my goal for all of them is to make sure that they are as set for going forward as possible. Mm-hmm. So ensuring that they have a great handle on their coaching business, that they're building their social media profile appropriately, that they're representing themselves appropriately. I mentor these guys in a lot of ways, just based on the things that I've learned, just to try to get them in a spot that's going to leave them as happy and as fulfilled as can be. So I'm really pleased to have learned enough through my own kind of bodybuilding and business so far to definitely be able to help.
And how have you picked these athletes?
Obviously, they have to be good at what they do to start with. But then there are a lot of people that are good at what they do, but they're still shitty people. So they really have to represent the values that I try to represent as well. So their initial kind of innate reaction is enjoying seeing other people succeed. That's an important one. Like, I would not support someone who is a bitter or jealous person, or doesn't understand that there is enough success for everyone to go around. Like, that's an initial, a very important one for me. And then the second one is then just the immediate reaction is to want to help people, which kind of ties into the first as well. So if they have those qualities and they're good at what they do, then yeah, we want to support. We support 20 athletes at the moment.
Wow.
Yeah, like we invest a lot into it.
Yeah, such a good point about you can tell a lot from a person by the way they react to someone else doing well, and if they immediately see it as a reflection on themselves, or if they can genuinely be happy for someone else.
That is a big marker for me of someone's character. Like if someone is genuinely pleased for your success, then you are dealing with a sincere person. It's a big thing.
I was actually thinking this even when you were talking about Corinne and her success, and you know, a natural question would be like, oh, well, how do you feel about, you know, somebody else being successful after you've stopped competing? But you can see that, like, you could see like the look on your face when you start talking about her and her success is like pure pride and admiration and happiness. And that's what
almost as, if not more excited about that than like you're competing, which is amazing. Yeah.
Honestly, way more. Like everything about the way that we train is evolved around getting her to where she could be. But she has so much more potential in this than I do. Like her potential is unbelievable. And that's why it means so much now that we've managed to make so much progress with the eating, that we're now like in a spot where we can actually make progress. And there were years where it was really, really, really hard. And then now just the excitement of wow, we can actually do this is very cool. Yeah, very, very cool.
Amazing.
Cool. If we've got no other questions, because I think, have we got any of the other guys in the waiting room just yet, Mike? I think it's probably a good point to announce as well. We've tipped over the £25,000 mark.
Oh, that's amazing.
UNICEF.
Amazing. That is awesome.
I don't think we shared with you, Jordan, but it was initially a very achievable 2,000, ambitious 6,000 in the back of our head, and it's just so the support.
I remember a couple of days ago we were like, imagine if we made £10,000. We're like, oh my god, that would be amazing.
25 is incredible. You should be very, very, very proud.
Well, yeah, no, we wouldn't have got anywhere near this if it wasn't for all of the, everyone who's watching, everyone who's given up their time to speak. Like the amount of knowledge and the amount of incredible discussion that's gone on has been unbelievable. And so it's really down to everybody speaking that, the fact that we've managed to get so many people to want to come along.
Also, shout out to Lockdown for enabling everyone to their weekend doing this.
Yeah, nobody has plans.
Although Mike, you did get criticised by a fellow medic. Apparently, the raising £25,000 for charities.
No, there's a paltry sum. I know it was really interesting actually, because they weren't directly criticising me. They were criticising other medics for getting involved with me as somebody who clearly is more concerned with an Instagram profile than with helping people. And I thought it was fascinating, because it's not somebody who follows me or has ever had anything to do with me or us or the podcast or anything like that. Although I think she blocked me on Twitter when she had insulted a friend of mine for posing in lingerie, because she'd posted a picture. She's a fitness blogger, and she'd posted a picture of herself in workout gear. And
not
and I had
even
said,
that skimpy, to be honest.
No, exactly. It was like leggings and a crop top. But it was it was interesting, because I all of our responses to her had been so polite, instant block. But you know what? I'm not here to judge anybody. I just wish people were less judgmental of other people without really knowing the story.
One critique compared to the kind of the general consensus, I think that you can accept that. That's not a bad ratio.
Exactly.
Yeah. I know,
we've got
and it's
25,000 other reasons to be happy.
Yeah, you always sort of think about the one person that has something negative to say, instead of the hundreds that are like, oh, this looks great, I'd love to listen, I'd love to give up my time to speak at this. So massive thank you to everyone who's done that.
Yeah,